to kick us off here.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another edition of AutoLine After Hours. John is not here, and as I often say, I have to bring the smartest people that I know in the industry to help me out on days like this. So in this case, I brought in Tanya Gazdik, who is the automotive editor for Media Post. Tanya, your second time on the show. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. I must have done well the first time.
You did remarkably well, and I just know the audience liked you, and so here you are.
Fantastic.
And one of our stalwart favorites, Mike Austin, who is now the executive editor of Road&Track. So congratulations, because you weren't the executive editor of Road&Track the last time you were here.
No.
So
glad to be here. Glad to be at Road&Track. I hope there were a few other people on the list a little smarter than me before you got to me, though.
No, this is like right up there. So the reason I had to bring these very smart people in here is because we have a very special guest, Mr. Craig Keeys, who is the Group Vice President of Infiniti Americas.
Thank you for having me, Gary. I appreciate it.
And we appreciate your being here. So Infiniti's existed for 35 years. Now, we're going to get into things about Infiniti and about the QX80. But first, I've got to have you tell us about your career. Now,
okay.
I find this to be rather amazing, okay? And I truly mean that. So in March 1998, you joined Nissan, and your first job was warehouse operator. Then you were advertising specialist, market representation specialist, dealer parts and service manager, regional training planner, advertising manager, market representation manager, dealer operations manager, senior manager, regional marketing, area general manager, senior manager, regional operations, senior manager, fleet rental sales, regional VP of the Midwest region, and then in April 2022, you got the job you're in now. That is incredible that you stuck with a company and have been able to get to the position that you've gotten. I mean, tell us about that. I mean,
I really appreciate being here. I appreciate being here with my esteemed colleagues in the industry, and look forward to the dialogue. Now I see why you had the notes. I did start my relationship with this industry that I love so much today, somewhat out of necessity, working full time to subvene my education at Rutgers. And yes, that first role was a warehouse operator job that I happened to get simply by pulling a flyer off of one of my counselor's cubicles that just said warehouse work. Ironically enough, I believe in manifestation. My first car was a 1990 Nissan Maxima GXE, burgundy with the brown interior. Back then I was closer to 20 than 50, and I had wheels on the car, accessory wheels, tinted windows, a sound system. And so while I was working in the PDC, you'd get these prescribed breaks. It was a blue collar job. You get a break at 5:30, and intermingled in the shared cafeteria, because that facility housed Infiniti's Eastern region operations, Nissan's Eastern region operations, and the PDC. I'd meet professionals in the industry. I met the regional vice president at the time for Nissan, and I'd literally drag those guys outside to say, hey, you got to come check out my Maxima if you want to sell more Nissans. And through really fellowship and networking, once I completed my degree, I got an opportunity to interview for a specialist position on the advertising team. So that was really my second entry into the marketing and sales side of the business for Nissan. And you're right, 26 years later, I've been on teams, led teams, an individual contributor, and now the group vice president for Infiniti across the Americas.
So many people that get to positions like yours, though, have not had the stick-to-itiveness that you've had. What was behind that? I mean, what's your thinking?
Well, I think I'm a very curious person by nature, and so I just love to absorb, learn, network, meet people, and operate in a thriving space that's always moving forward. And I think this industry has afforded me that. I've got friends in different industries. I'll leave my friends and the industries unnamed that are in much more monotonous relationships with their careers and day to day are not as excited about what they do or passionate about what they do. And so for me, in an industry that's ever changing and always at the forefront of technology and evolution, I think it matches well with my curious spirit.
Great.
Thank you.
Guys.
I was just say you've been in different parts of the company, which I think is kind of interesting. Not just within one company itself is exceptional, but even just not coming out with a marketing degree and being in a marketing channel the whole way. So I mean, can you speak to that in terms of the perspective it gives you?
Yeah, I can, Mike. Thanks for that question. When I'm trying to give mentorship to up and coming talented people, I always talk about making the decision to be a subject matter expert or having a broader perspective. And I liken it to a pyramid, right? A pyramid that if there was a storm, right? Maybe not the most ideal time to use that analogy, but if you're a subject matter expert, your pyramid is going to be very narrow, right? Use marketing as an example. If you've just got marketing, but if you've got a broader pyramid and you've got a base with marketing, after sales, some corp comm, some field facing interface, when the storm does come, you've got a little bit more stability. And I think as leaders in any organization, if you have a broad perspective, you don't necessarily have to be a subject matter expert. As long as you've got talented people around you, you can be perceptive in any discussion and contribute and add value to the conversation. So for me, having that broad perspective is just really, really important. And I think it's part of what's driven me in my most recent years of my career as the group vice president, but even prior, regional vice president for Nissan in the Midwest region.
Tanya.
Well, marketing, I've covered you for a long time in my previous jobs when I was covering just specifically marketing, and it's still a big part of your job now, right?
It is.
And you guys are a relatively young brand. So is overall brand recognition still an issue, do you think? Or are you focusing now more on the vehicles, or is it still a mix of the two?
Yeah, that's a great question. Marketing is a super important part of what we're doing now. And to answer your question, I think it's both. I think we do have a very, very loyal following, including our retailers. But I also think that we need to educate customers through conquesting efforts about how great this brand is and how great our product is. If I take a step back, when I look at Infiniti over the years, when we launched the G and we launched the FX, there was a lot to talk about and engage around. And that's how we built some of that cult following that's still with us today. We've let some of it lapse as those people have ascended demographically and they've started families and they've looked towards SUVs and different things. And we haven't educated that community as much as I think we could. So I think there is an opportunity to continue to build awareness around Infiniti. And when you look at our campaign, Infinitely You, that is the goal, right? Talk about the product, talk about the interior, showcase that you have these luxurious accoutrements in a brand that people might not have explored in recent years.
So, okay, someone's going out to shop for a vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you as I mentioned before, you got the new 2025 QX80. Okay, but people don't necessarily know about that. And then they say, okay, there's Lexus over here, there's Mercedes over here, there's Cadillac over here, and there's Infiniti over here. Why should someone go to an Infiniti store?
That's a great question. I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways. One, I would point to the marketing today driving more attention towards Infiniti through QX80. Our spot premonition, which is it's really built around 3 different spots to promote QX80, 2 product focused spots, and then 1 more halo oriented. And premonition essentially has had the best memorability of any spot in the last 12 months. It's ranked like in the 20s, so it's done really well for us as a brand. So it's attracting new eyeballs. Now, in terms of the why would you want to come check out Infiniti? When you look at QX80, I'd put it in 3 distinct categories. The design, just look at it. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's quite the evolution The prior gen was 15 years old. I joked that it was going to be drinking soon, but it is quite the evolution. Much better in terms of look and feel. And then the second category would be the thoughtful hospitality. So once you step inside the vehicle, you start to see some of the features and benefits that are really tailored to the customer, even down to just the cell phone charger being at a 45-degree angle, right? Whereas in most vehicles, it's just a flat 180. I would also say, when you think about the drive, right? So now we've brought you in, now we get you behind the wheel. When you drive that vehicle, I said this today, someone said to us on the ride over, how do you feel competing with other brands? And I said, they're actually competing with us now, because finally we've got a formidable product. And if people get behind the wheel, get inside our vehicles, I think they'll feel similarly.
So kind of in a way extending off that, and looking at the QX80, but also looking out into the near future, is there a tagline or a phrase other than infinitely you that sort of what is the brand, what are the brand values, or what is the customer promise? I'm thinking something along the lines of ultimate driving machine, which is probably one of the best ones, and pretty old, but what is that sort of short, here's what Infiniti as a brand is?
That's a great question, because you could literally be on my team, because we're working on the brand promise right now. In fact, we have a global articulation of it. We're not ready to announce that yet. And we're going to even regionalize that a bit further, because once in a while things get lost in translation, right, between our Japanese colleagues and where we transact 90% of the Infiniti business, which is here. And so you'll hear more about that soon. But what I would tell you is the essence and spirit of that brand promise would be to transcend what others are doing, right? And create that distinction that you historically saw in our DNA with an FX, with a G, right? How can we incorporate that back into our product design, R&D communities, software engineering communities? How can we be a bit different from the status quo in luxury today?
You're getting a little bit close to the relentless pursuit of perfection. Just to say,
well,
Jonathan Price.
I was watching a video of Alfonso Obeza, who is in charge of design for Nissan, Infiniti, everybody. I mean, he's
an amazing ally and advocate for the brand.
And he used a phrase to describe the QX80, which I thought was rather compelling. He said it's powerful, practical, and provocative. And you've got these three terms that I think encompass what you guys are trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I would agree. The design guys are always very eloquent in how they describe anything, right? But I would totally agree, because the QX80, in terms of power, you've got 450 horsepower, 516 pound-feet of torque, coming out of a V6 twin turbo engine that's in the the GTR family. But I think the one that stands out most to me is provocative, because when you look at it, I would ask people to look at it side by side, right? We build PowerPoint presentations in corporate America all the time, and I have my team put together a 3/4 profile side by side, and let's just look at it and stare at it for a few minutes and then talk about what that evokes. And provocative is a great word, because when I look at just the sturdy presence that sits higher than the competition, but then knowing the performance, because I've been behind the wheel, I've got a QX80 as a demo. I think provocative is the perfect signature for the product.
Of course, powerful and practical are big in Michigan, because you guys can tow a lot with that thing too. So that's key.
Yeah, and well, when I think about Michigan, I think about traversing the snow in the all-wheel drive. So I'll throw that in there too.
All right.
our winters are not like they used to be. You don't really need that as much. So that's a good thing. I think I was there when Alfonso said that. I think it was at the reveal in New York, which you guys did at the top of a very large building outside. And
Yeah.
I just kind of, that to me, that seemed like a moment for you that Infiniti was really arrived and like really tooting its horn. And you had Erin Andrews there, who I think
What an
has become
experience.
a big brand advocate.
Yeah,
So
thankfully. Yeah, thankfully Erin's definitely supporting us. She's awesome. We had John Batiste at the event as well.
Yes.
Yeah, the event she's referring to was the debut of the QX80 here in North America, and it was at the Edge in New York City at Hudson Yards. The Edge is the highest deck, sky deck in the Western Hemisphere. It was quite the feat to get a full size SUV up to the Edge. We've got some camera shots on YouTube of how we did that, but essentially we engineered the car, had someone take it apart, company take it apart, and then put it back together. It was kind of like color by numbers. So they took the vehicle up there in a freight elevator, put it back together for this event. Erin Andrews hosted, kicked it off, and she's just phenomenal, right? Just having her present and the energy that she brings to the table. And then we live streamed a concert with our partners at iHeartRadio that was really headlined and led by John Batiste. So Erin is a fantastic partner, and pretty soon we'll be ready to announce a little more of a relationship with John Batiste as well. So we'll continue and extend from that point at which we launched the QX80. It was just a phenomenal backdrop and a wonderful evening. If you haven't seen it, it's available and it's out there on YouTube. Please go check it out.
So when you guys are developing vehicles now, Infiniti has become a global brand. It initially was more regional, and now it's broadened out. To what extent does the North American market drive development for vehicles?
Yeah, I would say that while we are a global brand, the strength of Infiniti lies within North America, and the strength of Infiniti within North America lies within the U.S. We've got a fantastic product planning team here on the continent, and I love and respect them dearly because they've got these glorious ideas for Infiniti and some things that we're not ready to talk about just yet, but I can't wait until we can. And I'm connecting the dots between the front line, our retailers, what the customers are actually saying, wanting, needing, along with industry expertise, and feeding that back through the product planning organization. And so I would say that our influence is pretty substantial when it comes to Infiniti, because the large volume comes out of the United States.
I did an informal survey on social media of non-automotive friends. That was, nobody in the auto industry could comment. I said they couldn't. And I asked them, what they thought of Infiniti and the brand and the vehicles. And it was, I'll be honest, it was a mixed group of comments. And there were some who were concerned about the price and also the dealer experience. Are those areas, now I know Nissan is obviously really working on, projecting the six under 30,000 marketing. You can buy 6 of their vehicles. You can't do that. So how do you justify the price?
Yeah. So there's a couple questions in there. What I would tell you is that you're always going to have polarizing opinions on any brand, right? I think we do have a loyal following. I think we've been recognized for our client experience. Even last year, JD Power recognized our retailer experience as number 2 in the entire industry and number 2 in luxury. Do you have a bad experience at a retailer, no matter what brand, once in a while? Those things do happen, but we learn from them. We adapt quickly, and we pivot, and we make changes. I would also say, in terms of price point, I think we have to elevate the stature of the brand, but we also need to make sure that what we offer to that client exceeds their expectation. And so when you look at a QX80 and what we offer in that product, and it tops out MSRP in the $110,000 range, right, without taxes and all the other details. But that FSUV segment, that large luxury segment, the average transaction price is closer to $120,000. And so we've got a competitive product, well positioned. We need to think similarly when we're looking at other segments, whether it's the E, just, you know, the size just below, that Pathfinder, that E segment, or the D SUV segment. I want to try to simplify this for people that may not be in the industry that are watching, but the 2 levels below, we want to make sure that we have similar offerings, great technology that when you wrap it up into a full package, it's seen as valuable and not just value, right? I think there's an opportunity there, and we can actually market that message, and that's the purpose of the Infinitely You campaign, to really showcase the interiors of the product, because when people see what we are actually offering in the vehicle at the price point, I think they respect it.
You know, speaking of the product, one of the things that I find interesting about the QX80 is that you have 3 screens. Okay, so you get a 14.3-inch screen as your gauge cluster. Next to that, there's another 14
times 2, yeah,
0.3-inch screen, and that's your infotainment. And then down here, you've got a 9-inch screen for HVAC and other various functions. To what extent is the utilization of screens key in today's market?
Yeah, there's a 4th screen in the rear of the vehicle, right? And so I think screens today, you know, I'm having a little anxiety and I want to reach for my phone, right? I think it's commonplace for everyone. I think whether you're at home, whether you're at work, or whether you're in your vehicle, it's become pretty standard. Now, in terms of what you offer within those screens, that's where the healthy debate around, you know, software engineered vehicles is coming into play. And so I think the big screens are with us for the foreseeable future. And now it's all about connecting those seamlessly to your lifestyle, right? Connecting them seamlessly to your home, to your daily itinerary. I like them. I actually like them. I think there's ways that we can continue to integrate and make things a little bit more seamless. And maybe, you know, one day it'll be a 28-inch screen versus 2 14s, right? But I think the screens are here to stay.
Is it a generational thing that younger people presumably?
Dangerous question. Right?
Well, I'm assuming that, you know, you want to have a robust
stack.
purchase base that is going to be with you for a while, rather than people who are going to basically get a vehicle and then.
I think there is a sliver of the community that still likes knobs and buttons and not necessarily the haptics.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that in my perspective with kids, right, that evolution, they are more in tune with screens today than ever. Yeah. And I think as a marketer, you're not only marketing for today's customers, right, and your products not only being developed for today's customers, you have to think about that future audience as well.
Right.
When it comes to you know, working with Nissan, whether it's North America or your colleagues in Japan, and you know, really making sure that Infiniti is somewhat set apart as a luxury brand, you know, and a premium offering. How do you navigate that in terms of you know, having access to the newest technology, or you know, whether, you know, powertrain or other sort of technology, and also, you know, maybe even in pushing the broader group to say, you know, we need to have this the flexibility to have, you know, something extra?
That's a great question. Well, there's a lot of lobbying that goes with it. But what I will tell you is that we do have access to a lot of technology, because if you think about it, you mentioned Nissan, and, you know, juxtapose that with Infiniti, but we've got a broader alliance with Mitsubishi and Renault. And there's a ton of technology floating around in these different pockets of the organization. And so really trying to be collaborative and making sure that we are engaged in the conversation, right? I talked about product planning and their presence and really how substantial and meaningful their voice is at the table. That's ultimately what gets us access to products and gets us opportunities to refresh vehicles faster. So you'll see next year, the model year 26 QX60 will go through a minor change, much faster pace than we have in the past. We're going to start to be a much more responsive company to the client demands. And really, I think having a voice, a collaborative voice within the organization, whether it's Nissan, Renault, Infiniti, or Mitsubishi, is going to be important to that end.
So we talked earlier about your career and how you've progressed through the company, and I was looking back at your career also this morning, and I know you've always been a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you've gotten some awards and recognition for that. Does the current backlash against that, worry you at all? Some automakers are pulling back on their programming, Ford. And I'm just Toyota, thank you. And I'm wondering, would you guys feel the pressure to do that if pushed?
Yeah, I'm a girl dad, and so at the end of the day, doing what's right is important to me, and standing up for what's right is important to me. And I think that DEI is good business. I think the world is just becoming more diverse. I think business is not just isolated to North America. It's a global enterprise. And I think that we have to be conscious of that. And so we're going to continue down the path of inclusion because it is good for business. And I can prove that out in numbers to anyone who wants to spend some time and have healthy dialogue around that. But at the same time, I also feel a deep responsibility to my own family and my team's family members to continue to promote that agenda.
So picking up on the business part of things, and I'll switch away from that specific topic, but I mean, what's your sense of the market right now? Is it not as good as you would imagine it to be, or is it better, or is it just sort of what's anticipated?
I think it's a little soft right now. This business is cyclical, right? And I think every 4 years when we come to the point of an election, people are a little more cautious about big expenditures, no matter what your political affiliation is. I think people are just naturally cautious, and it organically seeps into our business. You also have, even though the Fed just dropped the rate and there was a bit of relief, there was such an extended period of a high cost environment. And when your vehicle is your second biggest purchase that you're likely to make, sometimes that slows down. Do I think we'll come out of it strong very quickly? The PTIV jumps pretty substantially it's our Q3, October, November, December, our Q3 for our fiscal year, Q4 calendar year. And so I do expect a little bit of daylight ahead of us. And in fact, this month has started off really, really well for us. And I'm excited for that. And I think QX80 is going to be a big part of our success to close out the year.
Mm-hmm. So you're getting a lot of good feedback from the dealers that have these in stock?
Yeah, dealers and clients.
Yeah.
I was talking to at dinner last night about a client that was looking at another product, and I almost begged them, hey, just go check it out. Just go check it out. Trust me, right? I'll set you up, red carpet treatment. Just go check it out. And they ended up buying an autograph. Yeah. So I would say short answer is yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of good momentum.
So that's sort of like what we've been talking about here, that people need to see these products, and they may go elsewhere and not realize that you guys have some incredible stuff that they need to see firsthand.
And that's why I have a job, right? That's why I still have a role, because that's exactly it. The question is how. How do we do that effectively? How do we do that efficiently? And how do we do that in the environment that we're operating in today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, I got one more if you guys don't.
I'm good.
Please.
All right.
Please.
So
I'm enjoying my time. Thank you.
So you have one car, the Q50.
Yes.
What's happened to cars?
Man, that segment, and it's so near and dear to my heart, but that segment is shrinking. And yeah, one car, Q50, but we did announce a cool concept, the Vision QE. And so there is going to be an evolution. I think sedans have been part of our DNA historically, right? Sedans and coupes. And when we talk about product planning, I'm going to throw this out there because I believe in manifestation. We need a halo car. We need a halo product. So Pons, if you're listening, let's keep working on it. But right now, the world is changing, and consumer demands are moving more and more towards SUVs. People are coming out of COVID or living a more active lifestyle, and I think SUVs match the moment. But believe me, my heart, I told you my first car was a 1990 Nissan Maxima. So there's a place here for a sedan. And I think in the future, when you see the Vision QE come to reality, you'll feel like we hit the mark.
And that was the four-door sports car. So
the Maxima still is the four-door sports car.
So
I still remember the commercial that I love so much with, the sunset, and they had the Maxima, and the sun would go down, the Maxima would race down the road, and the sun would come back out. If you haven't seen that one, check it out. Yeah.
Well, Craig Keeys, the Group Vice President, Infiniti Americas, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Great, man. Thank you very much.
It was just great. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you very
Good
much.
seeing you.
I appreciate you all.
Okay. So we're going to hear from our great sponsor, Bridgestone, and we'll be right back. Thanks, Craig.
Making a life full of memories, one road trip at a time. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Weather Peak Tires with a 70,000-mile limited warranty.
Go Tigers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, see you.
Okay, can you? So if you heard that, go Tigers.
Yes.
So
Go Tigers, go
they
Lions,
win,
go
they,
Spartans.
They win today, and they're in the championship or something.
Yes.
And pretty amazing. Okay, so a lot of things have been going on. One sort of sad thing, but it does have an automotive connection, that in the past 2 weeks we've had 2 hurricanes, and they've been in the Gulf, and they've been bringing in lots of seawater, and seawater is not very friendly to EVs. So, Mike, what's your sense of EV ownership in places like Florida?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. With any news reports, there was a viral clip from North Carolina where someone's Rivian was just like caked in mud.
Oh, in Asheville.
Yeah, and had been moved, like 150 feet, and he said that it still ran, although I didn't see it move, in short video. So there is some advantage that, it is mostly sealed, and once the water's gone away, you're not even flooded the engine with water. But seawater is a different beast. It's really bad for electronics. So it's bad for any car, but as we've seen a few times with EVs, is you put enough seawater in them, or you combine seawater with other damage, and then it can cause a short. So that part, I mean, my instinct is it's not going to be that much worse than any other seawater flooded car. But I think there's another interesting piece with disasters, in that again, it's a mixed bag. But you have, the thing with EVs is you have all this power, and a lot of them will at least do a 110 volt plug, and some of them will do 220 or even home backup. So in Florida right now, you have people looking at a week or more of no power. You can get a few days out of your EV, and right now I assume the gas pumps are closed, so you only get a few days, but it's more than zero. So
all right, so we're talking on the one hand. I mean, so there's been reports of over a dozen EV fires have been a result, because basically what happens is that in the seawater, as you say, it shorts out, and there's this concentration of energy, and then it lights on fire. And so I was looking, and this is according to Tesla. Okay, so this is from the Tesla site, and they have a section on their site of what to do in case of emergencies. And it says, if the battery catches on fire, is exposed to high heat, or is generating heat or gases, use large amounts of water to cool the battery. It can take between approximately 3,000 and 8,000 gallons of water applied directly to the battery to fully extinguish and cool down a battery fire. A normal car is like 500 gallons to 1,000 gallons. So, I mean, suddenly we've got all this water that they need to apply to the battery. Battery fires can take up to 24 hours to cool. And it also says that there's the issue of possible reignition of these fires. And so some fire people in Florida are concerned about EVs being parked in lower parking decks that are just sitting there, getting the seawater. And how would you feel about being in a place like that?
Well, I think we're going to have to wait and see what happens. I think there's still a lot about EVs and home charging and batteries, and even the home charging. How is it going to survive if it's outside your house? If you in a hurricane, is it going to come through a hurricane? Okay.
Right.
So Cybertruck followed me up here on the road though today. So
really?
They're out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of batteries,
Yeah.
General Motors announced that Ultium is going to be put behind them.
The name. Yeah.
So what's happening there? It seems more than name to me.
It seems to be mostly name. They're retiring the name. They also announced that they'll be building more LFP, so lithium iron phosphate cells, which are slightly heavier, but have a really good longevity and less cheaper, and don't provide free oxygen if they have a thermal event. So the fire might take a little less water if that happened. And that's all a good move, and that's all. I think smart on GM's part is, any company is going to adapt and change as the technology evolves. The Ultium thing is fascinating to me in a slightly cynical way, in that GM has this history of naming things and branding things that are maybe unnecessary. Like, it's not going to be Energizer. It's not even going to be VTEC. It's just the battery. Like, do people really want to know, like, oh, well, this one's got Ultium? Well, no, all of the GM cars have that. So why are you adding another name to confuse people with? And they do that, and they have this big rollout, and they say this is the solution, and this is the future, and it's great. And then, later they go, well, we're doing something different, and we're not calling it that anymore. And it's like all this wasted effort, or maybe it speaks to some other cultural sickness or like need to be able to sell things internally. But it's like yet another piece in this graveyard of GM brand names that, I don't know was necessary in the first place.
Well, Tanya, you're our marketing person. What's the take?
I don't know that the average consumer really got anything out of Ultium versus any other brand name of battery. I mean, an EV is an EV, and they don't care. Nobody's buying EVs based on they're worried about range. They're not so much worried about branding. Range anxiety is still a thing, and we were talking about the hurricane, and if you're trying to evacuate and you're an EV, does that become an issue?
Yeah. And
so I guess what I'm wondering about is that, Mike pointed out that, they spent a lot of time, effort, energy, and money to do this branding. And that all seems to be like, never mind.
I mean, ultimately, I think it's positive because it allows them to just say craft the message wherever they need it to be. This is the car's range. This is how far it goes. This is how fast it charges. If they want to dive deeper, or they want to get into the specifics of the chemistry or the size of the pack or the configuration of it, they can do that. But that's more of a niche conversation, whether it's industry or fans or experts. So yeah, ultimately it's good. But like I said, it is kind of strange. And by contrast, you look at they put all this effort into Ultium, and they brought out the Hummer. They first showed the Hummer many years ago, and now they're essentially using the same kind of architecture and packs. They haven't iterated a ton, and I think a big contrast there would be Hyundai with the Kia with the Kia EV6 and the Ioniq 5. They're doing a mid-cycle refresh, and they added like 7 kilowatts to each pack. Like, they're not bothering with the branding. They're not saying we have this, this is the way we're going. We have this many packs and this kind of modules. They're just saying, hey, here's some more battery. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, the customer is going to look at what's the range on this. They're not going to look at what's the branding, or is it a pouch cell, or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And GM said that at the investor conference that the LFPs would combine with other changes that would ultimately cut $6,000 from the cost of making EVs compared to the current models. I think customers are more concerned about cost than branding.
Right. The thing that I sort of wonder about is I'm reading into this, though, that it seems that, okay, when Ultium started out, they're saying, okay, we're basically going to standardize on this. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to standardize on this approach, and we'll be able to grow it for the Hummer, and we'll be able to shrink it for the Equinox, right? I mean, but we would be able to achieve scale because these things are basically all the same, except for the size changes, right? But now it says, well, we're going to be using different chemistries, and we're going to be, using different cell configurations. And suddenly it seems to me that standardization goes out the window.
I mean, I think it depends on the type of standardization, because if you say, okay, we're doing, this size module, and each module is this many cells and this much voltage, and we can make that, bigger or smaller, that does help you a lot. But then also you're taking up space if you have modules inside a pack, because you have 2 layers of packaging essentially. And as you get smaller, which the Equinox EV, the standard, they killed a smaller range version. And when you shrink if you have a pack like Ultium is, and you shrink it down to a certain size, your voltage is low enough that all of a sudden you're not charging that quickly. And so that's what I'm saying is there's a trade-off to all of that. So you want to have a standardized, whether it's a pouch or a cylinder or a prismatic cell. That's usually useful, because then you can change how you stack them. But any further standardization than that, you get into some serious trade-offs one way or the other. And I think they're just realizing we need to tailor this a little more specifically to each application, and maybe the Ultium design didn't give them that.
Mm-hmm.
I give Jim credit for admitting that maybe there's a better way, and not feeling like they have to dig into what they started.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a good point.
If we think about it like in terms of internal combustion, I mean, so the Hemi, what a great name. Even EcoBoost had its moments, right? That people would go into a dealership and say, I want to get one of those Tauruses with an EcoBoost engine. But EVs may be a different beast.
I think at this point, yeah. And I think the engine actually kind of is an interesting analogy of at some point, a V8 works for a V8 and a 4-cylinder works for a 4-cylinder. And you can do things where GM's V6 is a perfect example. It's the V8 with 2 cylinders lopped off, essentially. But you don't want to go back to the old Jaguar Land Rover V6, which was the V8 with the same block as a V8 with a V6, but just didn't have 2 cylinders bored out. So I think that's
reduced costs.
Yeah, but you're wasting space and you're adding weight. And I think the same applies to batteries. Is you want to standardize what you can, and then tune it specifically to the car otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Tanya, are you seeing the messaging from OEMs in the EV space that is resonating sufficiently with people who might be interested in buying an EV?
I think it's gotten better. I think they've figured out there's still a lot of education that has to happen, and that's why putting your money on something like Ultium when people are still not even, convinced that they should buy an EV, they've kind of taken a step back. Range anxiety is still a thing, charging anxiety. There's so much education. People don't realize you can't charge to 100%. The last 20% is slow, and you really, I've had to educate people myself at charging stations who have bought EVs, and they're like, why can't I get it to 100%? What is wrong with this charger? Mm-hmm. So.
And I think though we've seen, I would say, especially in the soft market, more momentum than you might have expected at certain parts this year. And again, GM being an example, their sales, the products are finally here, the sales are finally taking off. Surely that might level off a little bit, but I think it does. All of my cynicism about Ultium aside, I think it does prove out that there was some validity to this strategy of let's get a good product in the market that we can play at a good price and a good volume. So. Mm-hmm. and even aided by the Tesla Model 3 no longer qualifying for as much tax credit as the Equinox.
So to what extent do you see EVs being driven in large part by subsidies, government money?
I think if you still look at the way they're priced, you need the subsidy to get, anything close to parity with a gas vehicle. And again, I think some of it's customer familiarity, but some of it's reality, or practical reality of, you might not pay more, especially if you're looking at a daily driver family car or like under $50,000. So yeah, I think they need the subsidies. It's still a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of it is, the ultra luxury performance, like millions of dollar stuff. People are saying, I don't want the EV. I want all the tactile things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Rimac is a good example where they've said their next car is actually going to have internal combustion as part of it, because that's what the ultra rich are saying is EVs are quick. That's a cool trick, but they want the more feeling.
So what is it, the Rimac Nevia that they have now?
Yeah, Navara, I think.
Navara, okay. And presumably the next one will be a hybrid.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of hybrids, Tanya, how are you seeing that play out in the marketing space?
Oh, they're more popular than ever. People are realizing that they're the best of both worlds. You get the mileage and without the sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and GM is even, reevaluating,
mm-hmm.
which is pretty remarkable.
What I thought was remarkable was a report that came out that people seemed surprised when Akio Toyota said that if the industry switched to all EVs, that people would lose their jobs because people who worked on engines would no longer be required. It's like, that's a surprise to anyone?
Yeah, I think that's colored somewhat specific to the Japanese auto industry, where those supplier chains are very closely tied to the OEM, and they even maybe feel some responsibility to taking care of those companies. And there is some truth. It's like, well, if we stop making this, then that whole business doesn't have their primary purpose. And I think it's thoughtful to say we need to think about this and get out ahead of it. I mean, a primary anecdote would be, engine parts companies, not necessarily in Japan, but in the U.S. Some of them have pivoted over to medicine, because who else needs precision metal machining? Medicine. And you're going to start losing some of your internal combustion business. So again, you got to find a place for it. So I mean, yeah, it's kind of obvious, but also it's it's better to plan ahead,
right,
than to just let it wither away.
Well, I mean, this could have, some huge implications, here in the United States in terms of jobs, as well as in Europe, where, a lot of precision engineering went on in machining, a different requirement for producing vehicles.
Yeah, I think so. At the same time, again, a lot of the vibe and the reality of EVs is they're coming. Hybrids are going to be a bigger piece of the pie than maybe we thought. Like eventually, we're probably still going to electrification, but that's 10, 20 years off. We'll still be making internal combustion cars for a while, if not indefinitely, depending on, again, like where the carbon emissions go, how plugins play out, how e-fuels play out. So I think it's more of like, it's not a hurricane coming through and wiping things out. To borrow from this week's news, it's more of like, it looks huge and it's coming, but it's a little ways off, and there's time to adjust.
Mm-hmm. So we're doing this live on Thursday afternoon Eastern time. In a few hours Pacific time, Elon Musk is going to make an announcement. Now, I don't want to necessarily read anything into this, but he's doing this at the Warner Brothers studio, okay? It's a movie studio where they make things magic. So what's going to happen there tonight, Mike?
I mean, supposedly there's a Robotaxi announcement, and
That makes sense.
You can tell me. I'm not sure if this means that they'll have a new car or it's just something related to current product. I will say I recently got a ride from the Tesla showroom in Lower Manhattan to LaGuardia in a Model X with the latest version of FSD, and the driver was hands off like the whole way. He made a couple of adjustments on the wheel with the buttons, but didn't grab the wheel. And again, that's one time, and it's slower speeds and a pretty hectic traffic, but not anything really unexpected, and the person was there to do it. So as much as it's not as capable, or maybe I think Tesla gives a wider boundary to the FSD system than they should, and they don't necessarily, there's a little bit of hand waving as to whether or not someone needs to have their hand on the wheel or not, and the driver monitoring. So I think they don't play it safe enough there, but it's also has a lot of capability, and maybe they will be trying to use that. So that's my guess, is maybe rolling that out in Model 3 and some sort of like Uber Lyft kind of model, but Tesla branded.
So you don't see a different vehicle entirely? No pedals, no steering wheel.
I mean, Waymo isn't ready to have a car with no pedal and no steering wheels, and they've been, as far as I know, fairly responsible in doing a lot of testing on it. I don't see how Tesla could do that safely now.
What do you think, Tanya?
I agree. I don't think we're ready for it. I don't think consumers were ready for it. Nobody's going to get into a car.
But I mean, is it going to be sufficient for the market if Tesla doesn't show something that is basically a moonshot?
I mean, I think the rationality with Tesla in the market has left the building a long time ago. And also, Tesla's has made a lot of, Elon specifically has made a lot of empty promises for a long time. So I would say this isn't the one that's going to catch up with him.
Well, so on the subject of this vehicle, so according to Reuters, that in 2016 he predicted drivers would be able to summon their vehicles from across the country within 2 years. That would have been 2018. In 2019, he predicted Tesla would produce operational robo-taxis by 2020. And then the announcement of this week's robo-taxi reveal came on April 5th, the day Reuters exclusively reported that Tesla had abandoned plans to build a $25,000 electric vehicle for the masses, known internally as the Model 2, initially sending Tesla shares down. Musk responded by posting a new tab later on his X social media platform, Robotaxi unveil on 8/8, which would have been August 8th. And it's October, isn't it?
Yeah, it's October.
Yeah.
He's an optimistic guy, you got to give him that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, who knows, I don't think it's fully distraction. There's some other storm waters ahead for Tesla, just in terms of Tesla or Musk specifically. Again, like the usual SEC and or NHTSA things, but I don't know. If I had to guess, I'm just going to say this is standard. Well, what is now standard, little bit of sleight of hand, some substance, and a few promises that I think we can all be pretty skeptical about being met.
So if we go, if you put your previous technical analyst hat on, and you look at the technology that Tesla basically is using, which is cameras and AI, versus the others like Waymo that is using cameras and radars and ultrasonics and AI, a whole full suite. What's your sense of A, the ability to pull it off without using the additional sensors, and B, the regulatory acceptance of something that doesn't have, the belt and suspenders?
Well, we have a really egregious lack of oversight when it comes, these companies can self-certify for safe self-driving. There isn't enough regulatory framework for that. So they can, they could play pretty fast and loose there. And And again, like I said, the one ride I had, it looked like enough, but this is the thing that we're, this is the tension between Musk's promises and what Tesla allows you to do in the car, and the reality of driving and self-driving, which is, and why other companies have sort of fenced it into specific scenarios, is you can't anticipate everything. And I think, and the argument of, well, it's even the argument of it's safer than a human is not enough to convince people. So I think that's the issue really there, is like, I'm skeptical that anyone is going to get there to like full drive anywhere, anytime sort of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
There's just too many variables on the road and other drivers. I mean, if everybody was in that type of vehicle, it'd be one thing, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
That's not probably going to happen for a long time.
And just like brief soapbox of my own too, which is, self-driving is solving this problem that is created mostly by cars, but also everything else. It's like, oh, we spend too much time in the car, so only if we didn't have to drive, or we have too much traffic, or we have too many drivers and all of these other distraction things going on in the car that make the car dangerous. So whether it's for safety or for just getting time back, those are two things that we created because of cars. And I'm not saying it's going to make any difference or it's going to change things, but a lot of the promise of self-driving is solved by things like public transit.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Waymo, and so Waymo and Hyundai announced that they were going to be, they formed a partnership, they're going to collaborate, and that Ioniq 5s, which are electric SUVs, which will be built in Georgia, will get the 6th generation Waymo self-driving system, and the plan is to roll that into the Waymo fleet. Do you see something like that catching on even more? I mean, Waymo seems to be the company that is ahead of the others in terms of autonomous driving. I mean, they're collecting fares on the road right now, so apparently they're doing okay.
I mean, yeah, I think there's some appeal there. If you look at any of the hands-free driving systems like Super Cruise or Ford's Blue Cruise, every time I've used it, it's at first you're like, all right, this is great, it's a novelty, and then you're like, okay, I'm a little bored because you're just sitting on the highway. But I still use it because it's just nice to take away that cognitive load. And again, you use it in the right scenarios. If it's shutting off a lot, or if it's just heavy traffic, or it's a scenario where you want your own control, you don't do it. But I would say we've established that automakers want to make that, and there's at least some customer demand. And I think the more you can increase that envelope of usability and safety, people will. It's at least an advantage from a marketing perspective, and I think people would be into it. I mean, there's plenty of time when, yes, you can't anticipate every scenario, but you could also be like, look, I'm stuck in traffic and all I'm doing is creeping forward. Like, the car could do this, and then I could, catch up on emails or read something or do something else.
But there's such a resistance, even with adaptive cruise. I mean, I have friends who won't even use adaptive cruise because they don't trust it. They don't trust that it's going to stop in the stop and go traffic. I think there's still a huge learning curve with customers and feeling secure.
So, I mean, the automakers have a lot on their plates right now in terms of competing with one another and the potential competing with Chinese brands. And we've heard twice now that the consumers need more education on electric vehicles and they need more education on autonomous vehicles.
Yes.
Who the hell's going to do this education?
That's the problem. Everybody's kind of passing the buck. Is it dealers who teach customers how to use the technology in their cars, or are consumers on their own to just Google it and YouTube it and figure it out? Or, nobody really is taking responsibility.
And will they?
They should, if they want to sell the technology.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say no. I mean, if we've looked at automotive crashes and pedestrian deaths are on the rise, not to laugh. It's not a laughing matter. It's just,
it's true. Yeah.
And yet we're putting in these huge screens that your eyes are drawn to, and you still have your phone. Like, yes, there's choice, but if you drive a car with no screens versus a car with screens, it is undeniable that your attention is not grabbed as much by the outside road. And yet automakers are saying, well, the car's a device, or people want this. And it's like, they haven't demonstrated any responsibility thus far.
Give Lincoln credit. At least they've got the screens, out of reach and right below the windshield on the new Lincolns.
And that does act more as like a giant instrument cluster. So
yeah,
is that.
They're acknowledging it, that there's a problem.
Of course, you're a Road and Track driving enthusiast, so we know that you want to have a more fundamental vehicle to drive.
Yeah, and I have a few cars of my own with no screen, so I get a little bit of culture shock switching between the two.
All right, so I want to end this on something that I find rather amusing, and I hope others will as well. It was announced today that Segway 9bot has established a strategic partnership with Mopar. So select Segway products, including its popular electric scooters and go-kart, are now available to Mopar's authorized Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, Jeep, and Ram dealers in North America. So it's not the classic Segway that the two wheels that we may remember from the days of Dean Kamen, but it's a scooter and a little cart. Isn't this wild that is going to be sold in Mopar dealerships?
Yeah, I guess any port in a storm.
For Stellantis?
Yeah.
But I mean, also, I think there are parts of the country where you have these, planned communities or HOAs that are kind of sprawling, and people regularly have go-karts and, drive to the pool or drive to the community center or drive to the retail district. And it seems to be like a huge and growing market. And, if you have a golf cart, capture it. And same thing. I mean, maybe there's a piece too of like, you're finding a point of purchase, right? Like there are people that maybe want one of those stand-up scooters, but they never come across them. Well, you're buying your car, you roll it into the payment plan, you can stash it in the trunk or in the back of your truck, and get from the tailgate to the game or whatever last mile things you need to do. I would say, sure. I can't say whether it's great or bad, but it seems to be worth a try.
All the automakers are professing to be mobility companies. This is just another example of that. They're showing a different use, a different, there's people who will need those and buy those, and might as well.
Do you think it's a good partnership?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Well-known brands,
I would say that the problem with any of these last mile mobility things, like scooters, is it's very difficult to improve on the functionality of a bicycle. Like the use case for when a bicycle isn't the perfect thing to go short distances is a lot smaller than maybe people are willing to accept.
Well, we'll see how that works out, and I'm sure that any upside to increasing mobility would probably be a good thing.
Yeah.
And
and helping Stellantis' bottom line.
Yeah, so I think they have to sell a lot of scooters to make that happen. All right, Tanya Gazdik of Media Post, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Very much.
Yeah.
Mike Austin, Road and Track, always good to see you.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
So read their publications, support their work, and we'll see you all next week.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.